So hello everyone, welcome back to our Inclusive Digital Innovation Event Week. Today we have the exciting topic of GAIA-X on our schedule, and we have the honor of having Hubert Tardieu with us, who is the CEO of the GAIA-X organization, to explain to us exactly what this great European initiative is. But before we head over to Hubert, I'm happy to give the word first to Adrian Gregory from Atos. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Adrian Gregory, Senior Executive Vice President of Financial Services and Insurance and Global Head of Atos Syntel at Atos. And I'm really delighted to introduce our Digital Innovation Event Week. So this is a week where we're getting some really world-renowned experts to talk about topics, followed by some really great discussion and debate as to how technology can help business progress and serve citizens, people, customers, consumers better in our world as time goes on. So during the week, we'll be sharing brand new research which has been undertaken as part of the EU Finder project. Finder is a competitive Marie Curie research and training program funded by European Committee and stands for Fostering Innovation Networks in a Digital Era. The research and training program is driven by a collaboration of Radboud University and Atos. Finder demands a sophisticated understanding of the context in which business is done, the effect of technology in driving these collaborative processes, and of the stakeholders involved. Finder's integrated curriculum prepares students to drive change at the vanguard of business and technology by challenging them to consider multiple perspectives and to create innovative solutions to problems, but in such a way that they're not only profitable to business, but also relevant and responsible towards society at large. You'll hear from some of these students during the sessions later this week. Today's session will focus on GAIA-X, the future of the European data cloud. Within a few months, GAIA-X has developed into a new European data ecosystem. This Franco-German initiative is now growing with the participation of more EU member states and the collaboration of nearly 180 organisations and the creation of 7 national GAIA-X hubs. So today, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Hubert Tardieu. So Hubert is chair of the GAIA-X AISBL, and Hubert had a very long career of 27 years in SEMA, Schlumberger SEMA and Atos, and in the last 5 years at Atos was advisor to the CEO, looking at future direction of the business, engaging and leading the scientific community, and looking at how technology can help drive business and society forward. So really pleased that Hubert is here with us today, and Hubert will give a speech around GAIA-X, the importance of it, and in particular how it relates to financial services, and then followed by a discussion and debate. So with that, I hand over to Hubert.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you at the invitation of IVO. So just as it has been said by Adrian, I am not anymore the GAIA-X interim CEO because we have luckily recruited our CEO and our CTO. And so I am now the chairman of the board. So what I wish is to show you what is GAIA-X and to show you how we believe it will significantly impact the financial domain where most of you are active. Next, please. So I would like to start with a consideration which is extremely important for all of you. This consideration is that in 2020, only 26% of EU companies are using cloud to do their processing. This figure is really below the par as compared to not only the US situation, but also it shows a big contrast between the northern part of Europe with, as you can see in this graph, Finland, Sweden and Denmark already at 60%, while, and some of you are representing this part of continental Europe, France and Germany are, for France at 21%, for Germany at 20%. This is a growth as compared to 2018 because they were respectively at 18 and 19, but significantly too low to benefit from the advantage of cloud. The statistic I am sharing with you are the latest statistic of Eurostat, which have been corrected from those services which are not really what we call cloud services, typically email services, cloud software suite, or cloud file storage. The objective that GAIA-X has given to itself is really to double the cloud penetration in the next 4 to 5 years. And I would like now to show you how we intend to do that. Next, please. So what GAIA-X is an AISBL, which is a non-profit association, Belgium law, which have been created in the 15th of September by the 22 founding members. And you can see in this chart the logo of the GAIA-X founding member. It's interesting to say that among the 22, 11 are cloud service provider, 7 are users, 2 are academic, and 2 are association. But you see here many of the key companies in Europe, obviously including Atos, but also SAP, also Siemens, also Orange, also Bosch. During the first months, we have been defining the governance of GAIA-X, but also we have been very active to create what we consider to be the way forward in order to make Europe entering really the digital era with a cloud. And what we have discovered is that the main reason why companies, and in the case of this session, banks, are frightened to use cloud, there are 3 reasons. One, the absence of portability. If they use a cloud service provider, they will be linked to this cloud service provider for a long time. It's a little bit them resuscitating the mainframe syndrome of 20 years ago. So if you are with one, you cannot leave that provider. That is the first handicap they want to sort out. The second handicap is about portability, not portability, interoperability. If a bank is willing to share data with another bank, and if the 2 banks are not using the same cloud service provider, interoperability will be impossible, meaning that only if banks are sharing the same cloud service provider, they can share data, which is unacceptable. And finally, everything which has to do with digital sovereignty, meaning the ability to make sure that data which are shared are used for the purpose for which they are shared. So within an open community-based implementation, we have been between users, and in your case banks, cloud service provider from Europe, and cloud service provider from international origin, we have been defining what we call policy rules, which are the best practices we believe will be important to sort out this question of portability, interoperability, and digital sovereignty. These policy rules are part of an architecture of standard, and they are implemented in a federation of services. I can give you one example of this policy rule. This is something I did when I was advising Thierry Breton when he was the CEO of Atos. This is a rule about localization of data. It is easy to say that you want that your data be stored and processed on the European soil, but it is very difficult to implement that in a way which can be tested and which can be certified. As you have seen in the recent past, this policy rule, which was established in December 2016, has become absolutely a natural practice with all the hyperscaler from the US establishing data center in Europe to respect that rule. And we are now entering into what we call the open ecosystem time, where the objective is a creation of data spaces and industry platforms, which are organized, and I will come back onto that, by domain, with one specific domain, which is a domain of finance and insurance. Data and infrastructure are the thing on which we are working, but next to the data space elements. Next, please. So who are we? These are the statistics we had when we were during November 18 and 19 in the first GAIA-X Summit, where we were lucky to welcome 5,400 participants. You see here, we had at this time, in addition to the founding member, 159 new members. Those 159 new members have now become almost 200 at this point, and those members are representing just about all the cloud service provider from all over the world, but also all the European service provider in terms of cloud, and most of the users in the various domains representing what is key in Europe in terms of banking, in terms of energy, in terms of health, and so on. You have here the statistic in terms of large tech, 42, large users, 23, NPO 40, 38 SMEs, and 16 medium-sized user and tech companies. Next, please. So, how have we been working? We have been working by creating initially, at the same time that the European Commission has put together the European data strategy, GAIA-X has written and published what we call the Franco-German position paper. This is something you can find on the net, which is defining the objective of GAIA-X. Next, please. What are the elements which are important for GAIA-X? As I mentioned, they are the policy rules about application portability and interoperability, infrastructure portability and interoperability. They are applied both on data and software, but also on infrastructure. So this is a policy rules level. Next, please. Those policies are part of what I have called architecture of standards. So in the upper part, I would say the one about data and software, this is where we define ontology, so the description of semantic description of data, but also APIs by industry vertical. And we also define the infrastructure portability in terms of identity and access management, self-description, and network and interconnect, to finish with the next, please, which is the GAIA-X Federation of Services. So these policy rules, which are part of the architecture of standard, are in turn the basis of the GAIA-X Federation of Services about identity and trust, about federated catalogs, about data sovereignty services, and about compliance. Next, please. So, let me say what is important, and I will take some example now in the financial domain. As I mentioned, is that we have portability of data, interoperability, common commercial and legal framework. This is what the users are asking us. How do we implement that in GAIA-X? By policy rules, by architecture of standard, and by federation of service. Next, please. And the key element there, and if there is one domain where this thing is fully understood, it is the financial domain. We need to be able to check the compliance in terms of portability, interoperability, and common commercial and legal framework simply by having mechanism to check that ex-ante compliance can be proven by the cloud service provider. So if I take 2 minutes on that, and I believe this is probably one of the most important elements I can pass to you, what we have learned is that really you need to cover the whole of the description of the data, but also the description of the infrastructure if you want to respect the real compliance. This is especially true in the regulated market, and we have basically at this point 2 regulated markets, the one for finance, but also the one for health. And recently, we have seen the automotive market with all the measurement of CO2 emission becoming a very regulated market. So, cloud adaption through rules which can be checked in terms of compliance. Next, please. The second point, which is very important, is what we call data space facilitation. These rules cannot be the same for every domain. So we have had now for about 6 months a very intense cooperation between players in the financial sectors, players in the industrial sectors, players into the energy sector, players into the healthcare sector. So typically in the financial sector, most of the French banks are now part of GAIA-X. In Germany, we are happy and proud to have Deutsche Bank as part of GAIA-X. In Italy, we have Intesa San Paolo, but many more are coming. And why are they coming? They are coming to define together 2 elements. What are the use cases which are especially critical for each of these banks? And the second point is to be able to share between themselves some elements which make this data space possible. You in finance have the great advantage to have had PSD2 in operation now for 2 years. Therefore, all the API aspect of the portability of and interoperability of data has been handled through APIs through PSD2, but you still need to build what we call the description, common description of data, what is called sometimes ontology, and that will immensely help to exchange data between various financial institutions. What is important to be said is that in the document which is currently prepared before the end of March 2021, the big challenge is to be conformant by design. Okay, compliant by design is a key word which is used by the partners of the financial sector. And this is especially true because of the strong request for compliance and in the regulated market of financial. The second thing on which they have been working very actively is to define use cases which are especially critical for the financial sector. And among the ones which are coming loud and clear are all the ones which are the one associated to the banks using their agents to be conformant to regulation like the anti-money laundering, which is costing a fortune to the various banks because they are obliged by regulation to check that every transaction can be justified. So the absolute hope of the financial institution is that we can go together between GAIA-X and the banks to visit the banking authorities to tell them we can do much more with digital in order to make sure that regulation is respected. Next, please. So all that is linked to something which is now becoming very obvious. While the infrastructure is about compliance and policy rules, the data space facilitation is about understanding that the economics of data will be driving the economy in the future. We have seen that already in the business to consumer market, where the GAFA have managed to capture data for their best interest against services they were offering for free. Unfortunately, I guess Europe has lost that battle, but the battle for the business-to-business data sharing is still in front of us, and we do not need anyone in Europe to make it happen. Next, please. So just to finish with that, as you can see, GAIA-X has both the roots and the tree and the leaves, okay? In the roots, you do have everything which has to do with the infrastructure. In the leaves of the tree, you have everything which is about the data spaces. And therefore, GAIA-X is the only project at this time which is taking these two aspects on an equal foot. On the leaves part, definition of ontology, specific APIs and their semantics, required technology standard and compliance defined by existing standard bodies. On the bottom, alignment of technical standard and set of technologies and products across provider for interoperability and portability. And in the middle, these federated trust and sovereignty services across consumer of providers, as I mentioned. So all these services will be delivered through open source, meaning that we will deliver reference implementation, which can be reused by the member of GAIA-X in their various domains of activity. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is really my conclusion, a European momentum towards a global digital for business approach. This is where we are recommending that you take attention, because we believe it will really change the way the finance market will be organized. Thank you.